Welcome to the Learning League, where we spotlight thoughtful leaders who are building better, more people centered workplaces. I'm your host, Cheryl Powell, CEO of Learn to Engage, and today I'm speaking with Maxine Nwaneri, award winning leadership advisor, best selling author, and founder of The Future is Greater. Maxine helps leaders redefine success by balancing peak performance with well being, purpose, and sustainable impact. Welcome, Maxine.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. It's so wonderful to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. I won't give it all away, but your story and your journey is very exciting. So I'm excited to share with our listeners. Let's start with the journey, right? Why don't you tell everyone how you came to be where you are today and when you first realized that you wanted to influence others?
Yeah, so my journey really began in a rather bizarre situation. This was nearly 3 decades ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
found myself really walking into one of the most horrific moments in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my late teens. I was a runaway. I'd dropped out of school. I had, fallen into drugs, made one stupid decision after another, and got to this point where I actually found myself homeless. And I was down to my last £3 in the UK, so pound coins, pound sterling, down to my last £3 coins. And this was the days, thankfully, not with the mobile phones with the whole world in your pocket, but
Mm-hmm.
literally go to the phone box to call people with coins. And I had no one to call because I'd let down every single person that cared about me. And I remember I was with a friend who was sort of living this crazy lifestyle as well. And they suggested, hey, why don't we go along and interview for this job? We don't have to do too much. We can make a load of money. Are you
Mm-hmm.
interested? And of course, yes. I thought, let's go. The realization of what I was getting into only hit me though, the minute I walked into the room and the stench of the room hit me. Because clearly we had walked into a situation where there was a guy who was a pimp trying to recruit women into his organization. And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness,
Oh,
how in the
wow.
world have I ended up here? I grew up in a Christian home with African good parents, wanted to be a doctor growing up. How in the world do you go from that plan to falling so low where this appeared to be your only choice is what I was wondering. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
just shaking and I must have like zoned out or something because the next thing I remember about the situation was this guy getting really annoyed with me and snapping me out of it, saying, you know how much you're supposed to charge, right? And I was like, I have no idea. My last job was in the coffee shop. What on earth do you charge? And I began to really panic big time, visibly shaking at this point, thinking, how could this be my only choice? How did I end up here? How in the world do I get out of this? I never felt, so ashamed, so afraid, so alone. And I remember thinking furiously, how do I get out of this? And hearing then, like I could hear your voice as loud as you're coming across. This is not who you're meant to be. You're meant for so much more. And I had no idea who or what that voice was, but I was so desperate for that to be true. I chose to believe it in that moment. And that gave me the strength I needed to run out of that room into the freezing cold street. I had still no money, no plans, no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I was meant for more. Very long story short, I got back into the school system I dropped out of, ended up graduating first class honors. I think that's like the 4 point GPO in the US, a
Yeah.
GPA in the US. Award-winning student at the top of my class, built an amazing career in banking before going to study for my MBA at the University of Cambridge,
Wow.
which catapulted my career into the corporate world, where I spent many years in IBM, really going around the world in various leadership positions, doing really great things within that organization before going out into business on my own. And to answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
when did I know? I got to this point where, by every standard, I was successful. I got married. I had my first child. I had a great job. From the outside looking in, I had it made it look perfect, but inside, I felt completely empty. And I just thought, we lived in Norway at the time, my
Yeah.
husband and I remember just getting up in the middle of the night one day, just thinking, how in the world did I end up here? I just feel so empty. I have everything that everybody thinks you should want, and I feel like there
Yeah.
has to be more. And it was like I
Huh.
heard that voice within me again. So, this is not who you're meant to be. You're meant for so much more. And there marked the beginning of this journey to really not only live out the life I'm meant to live, but enable others to do the same through my entrepreneurship, enable leaders to rise up and be who they're meant to be in their careers and in their professional lives. To have true, what I call true success, where your professional success doesn't have to come at the cost of your personal success and vice versa.
Yes. Amazing. I always
Thank
get
you.
goosebumps when I hear that story. Oh my
Oh,
goodness. Um, you mentioned that you came from a religious household. I'm sure that that shaped some of your beliefs and values. But today, how do they guide the decisions that you make as a leader?
yeah, such a great question, Cheryl. And I grew up with a Christian faith. And to be honest, during that stage of my life I just described, those early days, I did what my parents wanted to do. So I always joke and say, God was my grandfather at the point at that time. And
Yeah.
when it's not real for you, when it's not real for you, you end up, I end up rejecting everything, and just saying this is not for me. But the beautiful thing about it, I've come back full circle because I really believe that voice I heard saying this is not who you're meant to be. You're meant for so much more. I really believe that was God speaking to me through my intuition, which I believe we all
Yeah.
have.
Yes.
And the voice of God has guided me, through so much. And, one of the most fundamental principles of my Christian faith that guides everything I do is within that, Jesus says, whoever wants to be great must serve. You
Hmm.
must be a servant leader. So for me, when I look to create programs, when I look to serve work with my clients, it's service. How can I serve you? How can I help you be better? And there's
Yes.
principles of the faith where there's a fruit of the spirit, where you operate with patience, kindness, goodness. All of
Yes.
those things, I look to make sure that my work reflects that. So that really guides me. And it really is real for me now, where I believe in. It's
Hmm.
not just somebody taking me to church or making me do this. I genuinely have this faith for myself. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
It certainly is. Um, I concur. How do you define success? And has that definition evolved over time, or is it different from when you started?
Oh my gosh, definitely. So when I first started, I got back into the school system, did all that good stuff. I was so desperate at that point to make up for the horrific start I had. So I wanted to
Mm,
get the best grades. So I did. So I wanted to get a really good job. So I did. I wanted to make a lot of money. So I did. And
yeah.
success was all about, all of these things. They're great. I'm not to say they're not great. I still think they're really great. But the way I define success now, it's changed quite a bit from that because it has nothing really to do with how much money I make. It has nothing to do with external accomplishments necessarily, but I feel success truly is discovering what is my purpose, why am I even here, ensuring
Hmm.
that I, train myself, equip myself, empower myself to be able to fulfill that purpose and then go about fulfilling it in whatever little way I can each day,
Yeah.
little or great way I can each day. And I feel that that's what true success is for everybody, where, why are you even here, and really
Yeah.
discover that. Do what you can in terms of equipping yourself, empowering yourself, getting the courage if you need to go out there and fulfill it.
And I think I'll add to that. I think there's levels to that as well because I find that even my purpose has changed
Mhm.
over the years, the 30 years of my career. And so it just continues to elevate us.
Mhm.
Um, it's seems strange because you think to yourself, well, your purpose is your purpose. But
Mm.
as you grow as a person, right, you're destined for even greater things. So it has to
Yes,
change.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And interesting, I love that you say that because, as your
Yeah.
perspective, how you view the world changes, it has to change. But I think also, and I think not but, so to kind of add to what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
there's an element of the same theme that runs through. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can notice this when you look back across your decades of
Mm-hmm.
experience. So for me, like you say, it evolves and changes based on what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing. But the fundamental or underlying thing I find is I'm here typically, I think, to resurrect, to bring things back to life. When someone feels like, oh, my hopes and dreams are over, I'm that person that comes along and says, the future is greater. Come on, we can do this. And I think
Yeah.
whether I'm right book, which I've done, whether I'm speaking to audiences online or in person, whether I'm coaching clients, I find that, the way that God actually explained this to me is that you are my holy defibrillator, that literally when somebody flatlines in what they're meant to
Yeah,
be, you come and go, "Oof," and they come back
right.
to life in some way. So I
Yep.
think that no matter what I'm doing, what the assignment looks like, there's an element of like, you can do this, awaken to who you are, do what you're meant
Yeah,
to do, and bringing people back to life and who they're meant to be.
absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about that disconnect you were talking about before. There's a lot of successful leaders who feel disconnected inside. What do you think the root is of that disconnect?
That is such a great question. I've actually sat and thought about this for so long. And
Mm.
my answer, very quick answer is I don't think there's like a one size fits all because we're all different people. But in terms of
Sure.
the leaders I've coached across literally 6 continents now, across
Hmm.
cultures, the two biggest things, or they're kind of one thing that I see that causes people to get to this point of a disconnect is either a lack of clarity on what it is they're meant to be doing in terms of their purpose and
Yeah.
or a lack of courage to go about doing it.
Mm.
So typically so many of us are growing up where we're conditioned that this is a blueprint for success. So in my case, growing up as a Nigerian child, you read
Hmm.
hard, you study at school, you go on to get a good job, hopefully a doctor, a lawyer. There's like the approved in the approved
An
professions, and you do all
approved
of that, and that's
list.
right, the approved list of professions, and you do that, and that's success. And a lot of people follow then other people's expectations of what success is meant to look like, and they do it really well without
Yeah.
ever really getting clear on what am I here to do? Like really, if society or
Yeah.
family or expectations or peers weren't telling me this, what am I actually supposed to do? So there's that lack of
Yeah.
clarity. They've never had a time to really check. And then there's people who actually have a sense of, okay, maybe I am meant to be doing this, that, or the other, but then there's no courage to go ahead and do it because perhaps
Yeah.
they've spent decades building something that looks great, that, pays for a lovely house, a lovely
Yeah.
lifestyle. And it's like, oof. But, I have a client now, a brilliant lady who's doing big things in the world who actually knew that she was called to write from a very young
Yeah.
age, but she's like, well, how am I going to pay for my life if I write? And
Yeah.
now interesting some of the work that we're doing is enabling her to communicate powerfully in the work she's doing through the written word, but also
Yeah.
explore some creative expressions outside of her work. And she's like,
Right.
I've never felt so alive. So sometimes it's a courage that, this doesn't actually make sense. I've never seen anybody who looks like me maybe be successful doing this. So, oh no, I'm not going to entertain it. So I find that
Yeah.
this lack of clarity, I don't even know, or lack of courage, because it just doesn't make sense. What if I fail? What if I fall? Keeps people from actually stepping into what they're meant to be doing. So they build what looks successful on the outside, but on the inside, they've disconnected because,
Mm.
they're not aligned with what they are actually supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think facing our fears is just huge. It's just, I mean, we all struggle with that. And, even myself, I think to myself, what is the worst that can happen if I just go try it? I
Yeah.
mean, so what if I fail? It's not the end of the world, even if I go up on stage and trip, it's still not the end of the world.
Honestly, haven't we all had that fear?
Yes, it's one of mine. So it's, facing fears is a really big thing. And I think that the worst thing than not facing your fears is the regret. What if you
Yes.
never try?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Then you'll never know what you could have been.
Exactly. Exactly. I read this article actually that I think somebody who worked in a nursing home where they
Yeah.
were speaking to people at the end of life. And that was the biggest regret. The things that they not necessarily what they did, but the things they didn't
Hmm.
do. And they wondered now at
Yeah.
this point, what if I had tried? I don't want to be that
Yeah.
person wondering what if I tried. I'd rather try
Me
and fail. And
neither.
actually, I have failed a lot. Every leader that you meet that's successful has failed a lot.
Yes.
And that failure that people are so afraid of, it's just data as to, okay, this doesn't work. Let's move on to find out what does.
Yes. Exactly. It's a way that we can refine ourselves and grow even more. So
Mm.
I went to a leadership conference last week, and that was the theme throughout. You just heard, these phenomenal people just speaking about all their failures and how they just picked themselves back up and tried another way. And
Exactly.
it was so encouraging. I need like a leadership conference boost like that every those those were motivational speakers that by the time you left you were ready to like fly a plane or something. Like you just felt like you could do anything. It was just
Absolutely.
I love it.
And I believe you can. I believe you can. That's my motto for life, by the way.
Yes.
Anything is possible.
Yes,
We're only
anything.
limited by what we tell ourselves. Yeah.
We are our own worst critics sometimes, and society compounds that.
Yes.
Telling us what we can't do and what little box we're supposed to stay in, right?
Right.
So, what vital conversations are leaders, do you think, are avoiding today that they need to have with themselves or their team?
This is such a good question. Do you know, I read recently about something that I think is linked to this question. So I read this article or post or something by a
Hmm.
gentleman who's an author called John Bevere, and he talked about each person having three images. So we all have
Okay.
the perceived image, how people perceive us, and you often can't control that. Sometimes
Right.
I'll walk into a room and I can see clearly these people really like me, and there's one or two people that I'm not really sure I like you, and that's nothing to do with
Yes.
you. It's usually what's going on in
Yes.
them, how they perceive you.
Yes.
Then the second image is the image we project. So whether that's, on stage, on social media, or whatever, we have a projected image. And the
Hmm.
third image is our actual image. And now in this
Mm.
digital world that we live in, where it's so easy to kind of project something, I
Hmm.
think the disconnect, I got to think about, okay, yeah, if there's three images, what do we need to be thinking about as leaders? And
Hmm.
oftentimes the image that a lot of people project is very different from who they actually are. And I think
Mm.
we need to get honest with
That's
ourselves
true.
about who are we as leaders and who do we want to project and how true is that from who we actually are? And there's no shame in it. Like everybody probably has a bit of a disconnect. And get honest with ourselves and involve team and just say, okay, tell me if you're trying to be a leader who is a certain way, check in with your team. Am I coming across this way? What feedback do you have for me? And doing the
Yeah.
hard work, of not being defensive, because then if you create an environment where people could never give you feedback, then
Right.
what are you doing?
Right.
Right? And doing the honest work of ensuring that your projected or the image you'd want to project actually matches up with your actual image. And I don't know that we'll ever get there, but I think this is something that every leader is should really consider looking at. Is
Yeah.
my actual who I actually am. Like for me, I talked about those traits, those character traits of being a kind leader, a patient leader, somebody who has self-control, some of those
Yeah.
things that stem from my faith. How does that actually play out in my business as a leader, even in my home? And
Yeah.
I have to really honestly take stock and say, well, actually, I could be a bit more patient. What does that
Yeah.
look like? So I think we need to have these conversations with ourselves and with our teams and ensure that we are actually, projecting who we really want to be.
Hmm. So many things come into play, when working with teams and trying to be our authentic self. I have a authentic leadership course on our course platform, just incorporating everything from EQ to self awareness. And
Amazing.
I think that so many things like our own personal biases and how we were raised and even how we see ourselves, maybe if we might have confidence issues. um, so many things affect how we speak to people. How good a listener are we? How we communicate, right? How we come across in meetings. Um, it's all a way to combine, like you said, our authentic with what's projected. There has
Hmm.
to be a
Hmm.
balance, right? I'm not saying come to work, you know, in your
Yeah, no, you
pajamas
can't just come
and
say,
sloppy
this
and
is me, and like, take
yeah,
me,
like
take me or leave me,
we don't
no.
want to We don't want to see all that. But yeah, I mean, it has to be, you have to find a balance for yourself that's going to work where you still feel like you're being authentic.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got the
Right.
visual of somebody in their pajamas at work
I
now.
know. Me too. Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about like any causes or communities or issues that you're deeply connected to that might influence your work today.
Yeah, so there's a couple. So again, linked to the Christian faith, there's a and I love women and help supporting women leaders in
Mhm.
general, but I have a special place in my heart for female leaders because I
Mhm.
know what it's like to, come up literally from rock bottom as a woman trying to navigate. I know what
Yeah.
barriers, both the external barriers there might be, as well as the internal barriers. You mentioned confidence, sometimes feeling like,
Yeah.
do I belong here? Imposter
Yeah.
syndrome, some might want to call it. So I've literally dedicated my whole life to helping leaders navigate these internal and external barriers to
Mm.
success. I do that in my work, but also there's a community that I'm a part of. I'm on the advisory board for it's Christian Women in Faith, and it's all around, how does our faith show up in the workplace? Because we're called
Okay.
to be the salt, we're called to be the light, we're called to impact the world for good. And what
Yeah.
does that actually look like? So
Yeah.
that's something I'm very involved in. We're actually working to put on a big conference in London, a summit in London in April. So we're
Oh
working hard
wow.
towards that.
Oh
Yeah, so
wow.
it's very exciting. It's the third year in a row, and it's just phenomenal. People come in from all over the UK, even some flying
Yes.
from international. And it's just phenomenal just to
Wow.
see, women in leadership doing great things out there in the marketplace with, Christian faith, enabling them to do amazing things. So that's a
Yeah.
big part of what I like to do outside of business. And
Okay.
um, and also just in terms, oh, sorry, were you going to?
Oh no, I was just gonna ask where people can find more information.
Oh, sure. Yes, yes, yes. So people can find more. I've actually posted about this on, LinkedIn and Instagram with a
Okay,
link to
great.
find out more about it's called the Wise Well Woman Summit. And it's all
Okay,
about really
great.
using the wisdom from the Bible to, you know, be well in life, be well at work, and to really
Yeah.
the theme this year is to rise and reign. Because
Mm.
right now, if you look around in the world, it's more volatile, uncertain, complex than ever before. And there can be this fear that people have that, things are so out of our control, or what are we going to do? But I think, at least from the Bible, when I read, this is no surprise. We're told that you will have trouble, but I've
Yeah,
overcome the world, and through that, you can
that's
overcome.
right.
And actually, your light can shine in darkness. So it's all about
Yeah.
finding peace no matter what is going on and being able to rise above it all to really reign and rule. We're called to literally reign and rule. So if anybody's not familiar, what is
Mm.
she talking about in the Bible? She says you can rise above anything to rule and reign in life.
Yeah.
So that is what we're
Yeah.
enabling people to do. You don't have to be a victim of your circumstances.
Mm.
And this is something I learned thankfully in the marketplace before ever applying this, but I can see the biblical principles clearly lead to being able to
Yeah.
overcome anything.
Yeah. Are you one of the speakers at the summit?
Yes, yes, I'm honored to be a speaker for
Wow.
the third year in a row. So I'll be
Amazing.
speaking about the daily practices enable one to, how do you look at the chaos and then,
Hmm.
you know, operate from a place of peace and power
Yeah.
to influencing your sphere of influence.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. Well, for business owners, HR leaders, and people managers that might be listening today, what is one practice that you think they can start using immediately to create a more people centered and sustainable workplace?
Yeah, this is excellent. It's an excellent question. I would say probably the one practice, and we could all do this better everywhere, not just at work, is
Yeah,
become really great listeners. Really, really great listeners. I would say there is no kind of one size fits all solution for people issues and,
yeah.
creating a sustainable workplace. There isn't. So in this world that I kind of work with businesses on, like, sort of
Hmm.
around employee wellness, well-being, preventing burnout, that sort of thing,
Hmm.
what you could have as a policy or a solution for one individual could be great. And then it's completely horrific for the other person because,
Yeah,
they have different dreams, they have different backgrounds, they have different
sure.
biases, all these things we've talked about.
Yep.
So you really have to get great at listening. And I know that it can sound like, well, if I've got so many employees, how do I do that? There are ways that you can do that using technology, using, different things to
Yeah.
get to be this organization where you hear regularly what's going on with your people, and
Yeah.
where possible, bring them into creating the solutions, and don't feel like you have to create every solution. I'm thinking of like
Yeah.
one client in particular here in Europe,
They want
with this
to
whole
be a
listening.
part.
They want to, and it's so profitable because she was, listened to. She was involved in, she was brought in to kind of fix a lot of the issues that they have. And
Yeah.
this went on to save their business. They're quite a large business. It saved their business over $200 million
Oh
just
my
from being a
goodness.
better listener. To
Yes.
to someone that came up with suggestions that actually, based on who she was, it was obvious to her. But to the
Yeah.
board and leadership team, it just, there's no way they could have got to that. So it's
Yeah.
not only a good thing to do, it's a very profitable thing to do. So
Yes.
find ways of really,
What a
really
great
listening.
point. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So good. That is such a good point. I mean, I always say not just listening in the moment, but also when you work with your employees, and for example, if you notice an issue, or maybe you had a PIP, a performance, improvement plan, and you just wanted to set goals with them, and they should be setting the goals, by the way. You should not be telling them
Yes.
what the goals
Yes.
are. Um,
Yes.
but a lot of leaders forget those check-ins after.
Mm.
And that's such a shame, because it's a missed opportunity to
Exactly.
really empower somebody.
Hmm.
So listen, but also remember them, remember what their goals were and what they're going through, their experiences, and just implement that level of professional caring that's
Absolutely.
often missed in the workplace. There
Yes.
was a speaker um, last week at the conference. Oh goodness, I don't know why I can't remember his name. Such a good person. And anyway, he said when you ask someone how you're doing, how they're doing, ask twice, because the first time they probably will not tell you the truth.
Mm.
So they'll probably just say, "Oh, good, I'm fine, thanks."
Mhm. Yeah, we're
But the
fine. We're always fine
second
in England.
time, yes.
Yeah.
And then the second time you say, "No, how are you really doing?"
Oh, I love that. Hmm.
Yes. Such a good example of how we can be
Yes.
better listeners, and
Amazing.
practice our emotional intelligence. For sure.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
definitely going to be using that. Yeah.
Yes.
Because this is a
Yes.
culture of, oh, we're fine. And then we move on to the point of why we're
Yes.
here.
Yes. Exactly.
Mm.
We don't pause. Yeah. Well, this has been such an inspiring interview with you, Maxine. Thank you so much. To my listeners, if you want to learn more about Maxine, please visit her website, thefutureisgreater.com, to set up an appointment. And we will also have all of Maxine's information and links in the description area below the video. Thank you, Maxine, for being here.
Thank, thank you so much once again for having me. I've loved it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Learning League podcast. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you're gaining value from our content. Until next time, bye.